If you've been in relationships with narcissists, even if it was your parents or a significant other, you can agree with me that you spent a lot of time caring about how to make them happy, caring about making them feel good, caring about making them feel loved and special. And you probably spent very little, next to none, in fact, let's be honest, no time caring about you and loving you. Learning self-love is easy to say. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I love myself now. But doing the work to actually get there is a whole different story. So I put together 10 things that helped me on my journey to really learn to generate self-love, to really feel that self-love inside, so that I was no longer dependent on external self-love, but rather I could feel my worth, my value because of my own self-love. And when you get to that place, not only does it feel amazing, but on top of it, you are no longer a narcissist magnet because you are no longer dependent on external validation. So I'm curious, I'm going to give you guys these 10 tips, and I'm curious to know how many you are doing, how many you're not doing, and which ones you want to do more of. Okay, so let's get started. Number 1 is living life mindfully present. Before I increased my self-love, my mind was full. I mean, it was always thinking, but it was always thinking about what other people wanted. What do they need to be happy? How can I make them feel good? What can I say to make them, feel comfortable? How can I do this to make them happy? Never was I thinking, what do I need? How do I feel about this person? What would I need them to do for me or say to me that would make me feel good? I didn't think like that. But when I started to live present, then I began to experience how empowering it is to be focused on yourself, to really pay attention to what you need, what you feel, what you think. So let me know, are you living your life thinking all the time about how others think, feel, and what they need, or are you doing that for yourself as well? Number 2, something I had to do was learn to say no. And that, whether it was work, pleasure, whether it was doing something that I was just too tired to do, if it depleted me, if it made me feel overburdened, if I felt like I was doing more than actually felt good to the point that I would resent myself, I would say no to myself and always yes to everyone else. That's not self-love. That's saying, I don't care about your needs. You're not important. They are. So learning to say no comes with seeing that this is self-love. I love myself enough to realize my limits. I love myself enough to say no if something's going to hurt me. I love myself enough to recognize that they're allowed to be upset if I say no, but I still need to take care of myself. So learning to say no with boundaries is another piece of evidence that you're increasing your self-love. Number 3. Practice good self-care. Think about it. If you don't take care of somebody, you're not showing them love, right? So are you taking care of yourself? Are you feeding yourself healthy foods? Or are you binge watching TV on the couch, eating potato chips all day? Do you go all day until 2 o'clock in the afternoon in your pajamas? Or do you get dressed for the day, even if you work from home, which I do? And I know that when I don't get ready for work, I don't feel as good. We feel how we look and how we take care of ourselves has a direct effect on how we feel at that moment. So are you taking care of your hair, your teeth, your clothes? Are you really loving your body and yourself enough to do that for yourself? Number 4, do an inventory of who you spend time with. Do you have frenemies? The kind of people that love to see you in pain or suffering and don't support you when you're happy or being successful? Guess what? It's okay to change the people you spend time with. I told my daughter this illustration and it stuck with her to this day. I said, our friends are like elevators. They either bring us up or they bring us down. but they never keep us in the same place. They always have a direct effect on us. So if you have friends that are bringing you down, love yourself enough to cut the cord. Spend time with people that you feel good around. Number 5, forgive yourself. Now this is a hard one, especially if you were in a situation where you look back and realize, why did I stay so long? Or how could I have put up with that for so long? Look at the effects of that on myself, on my children, on anything, on my health. It's easy to stay mad at ourselves. In fact, sometimes we'll forgive other people faster than we ever forgive ourselves. But when we don't forgive ourselves, we're lacking self-love. We're basically telling ourselves there's no excuse for you. It's so easy to look back on our life and realize what we wish we had done differently. Hindsight is always the best sight. But now that you notice that, staying mad at yourself isn't going to change the past. It's not going to undo the things that were done. It just keeps you down. It keeps you in a place where you can't grow, where you can't move forward. So practice forgiving yourself, being compassionate with yourself, not only for past mistakes, but even in the present. If you're not able to accomplish everything you set out in that day, rather than stare at the 1 or 2 things you didn't do and ignore the 8 things that you did, which is probably what toxic people in your life did, don't internalize that. Give yourself credit for those 8 things. Give yourself credit for what you are able to do and what you are able to accomplish. Otherwise, basically, you're treating yourself the way toxic people treated you, and you don't want to do that. They didn't love you. They didn't give you love. So it's time for you to begin to give you love. Number 6, make time for the things that you love. Do you have a happy place? When was the last time you were there? Do you have a passion or a hobby? When was the last time you allowed yourself to engage in that activity? It's very easy for us to think, oh, I'm too busy, or no, I can't do that, I don't have time, or that's just ridiculous, or I don't enjoy that anymore. If we've been in emotionally manipulative relationships, it's very easy for us to lose our love for our passion because we've been conditioned with the constant badgering and criticism that came about anytime we tried to engage in it. So we have to redevelop that love for that passion by engaging in it and telling ourselves things like, I love myself enough to allow myself to do what I love. I love myself enough to give myself this time to do this. I love myself enough to take time to bring myself to this place. I love this place. I'm so glad I love myself enough to do this for myself. When we begin to talk like that to ourselves while we're giving ourselves the time to engage in our passions and our hobbies, that's where we begin to recondition our love for our passions. And when we give them to ourselves, we're strengthening our self-love. Number 7 is letting go of the past. Again, I never said self-love was easy. I never said it was a piece of cake. It does get easier. And these are the things that help us to get to that point. Think about it. The past is gone. It only exists in the interpretation that we have now. So if we're repeating this negative story over and over, and we're fueling or generating in ourselves emotions like anger, resentment, fear, pain, regret, then we're keeping ourselves in a lower emotional state of mind. We're never going to be able to move forward if we continue to allow our minds to marinate in the past. Letting go of the past is what helps us to release those blocks that are keeping us from moving forward. Part of letting go of the past, obviously, is something that we just recently talked about, is forgiving yourself. But also, it's stopping the story from playing over and over again. But rather than control your thoughts, which will not yield good results because what we resist persists, one of the ways that helped me to let go of the past was learning to view it from a neutral standpoint. Instead of, when something reminded me of the past, instead of looking at it and remembering the pain and the anguish and the emotional turmoil, I would notice it and acknowledge it. Yes, that happened. But after recognizing it and validating it, I would quickly ask myself, but where am I today? Look at how far I've come. Look at the things I've accomplished since then. And it automatically helps you to raise your emotional state of mind. And when you're focusing on things like that, when you're looking at the past from a neutral standpoint, and you're actually looking at what you've learned and how far you've come, it helps you to shift out of those negative states into a higher state of mind where you feel good. Number 8, if you really want to know how much you love yourself, ask yourself, how often do you listen to your gut instinct? Think about it. Imagine if you had a friend, right? And your friend is always going to you for advice. And you see clearly what's going to help your friend. And you always give awesome advice to your friend. And they never listen to you. Ever. Are you going to feel like your friend values you, your friend loves you, cherishes you, trusts you? No. You're going to wonder why the heck you even open your mouth. Because they never listen, they never seem to care. Well, if we're not careful, we're treating ourselves like that. Every time our gut instinct says, do this, I need this, and we ignore it. And worse yet, not only do we sometimes ignore it, but we do the opposite. So if you want to increase your self-love, begin listening to your inner gut instinct and then putting it into practice. Acknowledging its advice, acknowledging what it needs and wants, and giving it to yourself. If you do that, you are going to feel such a connection to self that is going to be so powerful. Number 9, stop judging yourself harshly and develop a compassionate dialogue. I was talking to someone recently and I said, we were talking about an inner dialogue and the importance of having a compassionate dialogue. And she told me, she's like, well, that's just silly. I have to talk to myself. And I asked her, I said, well, do you find that you're telling yourself negative things a lot? Are you kind of hard on yourself? And she was like, yeah, I could write a book on all the things I say about myself that are harsh. So I told her, I said, well, you're talking to yourself. The only difference is that you're being really mean and hard on yourself. What I'm talking about with having a compassionate dialogue is the same talking to yourself. But rather than judging yourself harshly and putting yourself down every single time, you're building yourself up. And her eyes got huge and she was like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. I do talk to myself. I'm just really mean. So if you want to increase your self-love, pay attention to your inner dialogue. What do you say to yourself on a daily basis? And if you recognize that it's negative, start having compassion to yourself. Number 10 is learning to live as the genuine, authentic self that you are. A lot of us were raised to be people pleasers by toxic parents. And so we lived life analyzing what other people needed and becoming what they need, kind of like a chameleon, becoming what they needed because we thought, or we were trained and taught by toxic parents, that our job was to make other people happy. And that the only time we could feel good about ourselves was if we were doing that. Well, that was faulty programming that we received. We all have the right to live as our authentic self. And when we begin to do that, our self-love increases. Because when we don't do that, we're basically saying, oh, who you are is not enough. Who they want you to be is what you have to be, because their values and what they want is most important. When we begin living as our authentic selves, what we're basically saying is, I love me enough to show up as me. When I was teaching my daughter this, she said something interesting to me. She said, but Mom, what if they don't get me? They're not going to get me. They're not going to understand me. They might not even like me. And I was like, and? I said, you're not put on this earth to make them like you. You're put on this earth to be you, the beautiful self that you are. And for those that appreciate you, that's awesome. For those that don't, that's their loss. But there's no reason to put yourself in a closet. There's no reason to hide yourself in some internal closet because of how someone else feels. And and then I asked her, I said, do they, we were talking about specific people, I said, do they hide who they are? And she was like, no. I said, so what gives them the right and you not? And once she got it, it clicked. And now it's just been such an amazing journey for me to watch her showing up as herself as opposed to, what she thinks other people want. It's been an amazing journey, and I invite you guys to take this journey too. How many of these things are you actively doing in your life now? I would love to know in the comments section below. Is there one that you're struggling with more than others? Let me know. I would love to hear how it's going.